15 famous Hollywood rumors finally put to rest. Part 1.
If you are brand new to our channel, we invite you to take a moment to subscribe. Just click on the lit red button as well as the gray bell. Why the bell? Well, it will let you know every time we post a new video.
1. The hurricane was guilty. You know the story of Reuben Hurricane Carter. You've heard Bob Dylan sing about his wrongful conviction in the protest song, Hurricane, and you saw Denzel Washington portray him in The Hurricane. The huge problem with this all is that you've heard only half-truths. Reuben Carter was wrongly convicted, but he was never innocent. His rights in the trials were botched and mismanaged, but, by all legal accounts, they had the right man. Start with his boxing career. There's been some talk about Carter having been screwed over by white judges, but that's all Hollywood. The fights he lost were lost because he was beaten badly. The murders that were committed had eyewitnesses that knew intimate details about the getaway car and the men involved. The weapons used were found in the car that the men were found in, and witnesses who vouched for Carter at the first trial later admitted that they were bribed. Carter himself admitted to being a thug and a criminal. The only reason his third trial was thrown out and Carter was released was because the procedures in the earlier trials were all messed up. He wasn't exonerated, and he was never found innocent. He was convicted of a triple homicide twice, and he reformed into a good citizen in his later life. Let's not get these two things mixed up like Hollywood did. 2. The first fart of movie history. This rumor gets brought up all the time. We wish it were true, but it isn't. Mel Brooks is always credited as the man who gave film audiences the first audible fart and fart joke in a movie. The scene that incorrectly gets the award is in the hilarious 1974 comedy, Blazing Saddles, which has a bunch of cowboys sit around a fire eating beans, belching and farting with each bite. It's gold, but it's not the first fart. Even though it's difficult to say who truly had the first, we know of one for sure which came out before. The film was Cold Turkey, which came out in 1971, 3 years before Blazing Saddles. The scene has 4 men in a limousine engaged in a very serious conversation. The mood is tense when Edward Everett Horton lets out a fart. Unfortunately, Horton passed away before the movie was even released, so he never even got to see his famous fart on the big screen. 3. Harrison Ford's poor Blade Runner voiceover. There's always been this story attached to Blade Runner, that in the versions with Harrison Ford's voiceover, Ford mailed in his voice acting performance to sabotage what he felt was an unnecessary addition. That has been long disputed by everyone involved, but there are some half-truths in there. Ford, for one, has been very upfront about how much he hated having to do the voiceover because of how stupid he thought it was. Here's what he said: "I contested it mightily at the time. It was not an organic part of the film." Later, when asked if he intentionally botched the delivery of the lines, he said, "I delivered it to the best of my ability, given that I had no input. I never thought they'd use it. But I didn't try and sandbag it. It was simply bad narration. The result was a dry and monotonous delivery." Ford said he was trying to make them sound as human as possible, but the narration just wouldn't allow it. 4. Mr. Rogers, the Vietnam sniper. Some people heard it was 25 kills, others 50. There are some who swear he had 100 confirmed kills, and the odd ones claim he had the most kills ever recorded in Vietnam. The only thing that everyone can agree on is that the lovable Mr. Rogers from the children's television show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, was a deadly sniper in the Vietnam War. Unfortunately, while it does make a pretty neat "you'll never believe it" story, it's not true at all. The almost too nice Mr. Rogers doesn't fit the typical mold of a U.S. soldier, and that's why the story was so interesting. To most people, he seemed much more like a minister than a soldier. Well, that's also because he was one. Fred Rogers attended the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary and the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School of Child Development. Later, in 1963, he was ordained as a Presbyterian minister. After that he started a short children's show on the CBC called My Strogers, which led to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the show we all know. 5. The Billy Bob and Angelina blood vials. Over the years, the weird vials of blood that Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie wore around their necks for a little while have taken on a life of their own. Thornton recounted the escalation of the rumor with a little humor, saying she thought it would be interesting and romantic if we took a little razor blade and sliced our fingers, smeared a little blood on these lockets, and you wear it around your neck just like you wear your son or daughter's baby hair in one. Same thing. From that, we were wearing quart jars of blood around our necks, and we were vampires and we lived in a dungeon. In reality, the blood was not even a drop, let alone a vial. They just dabbed their fingers and that was it. Nothing too creepy about that. Or is it? 6. Humphrey Bogart is the Gerber baby. The Gerber baby is not Humphrey Bogart like many believe. Just like Jodie Foster isn't the Copperton baby. The real Gerber baby is Ann Turner Cook. The Bogart rumor started because Bogart's mother, Maud Humphrey married Belmont Bogart, hence the name Humphrey Bogart, was an outstanding watercolorist and illustrator. Maud would use Humphrey's likeness in many of her illustrations, including those for Mellon Baby Foods. She just never did anything for Gerber. In fact, Bogart would have been about 30 years old when the Gerber baby was created. He's also a male and that baby is female. Turner Cook's image was used by her neighbor, Dorothy Hope Smith, who created a charcoal image of the little girl and sent it in to Gerber to be used for the next 80+ years. 7. Brandon Lee died on film. Brandon Lee was shot on the set of The Crow by a prop gun that had a bullet with an intact primer lodged in the barrel. Since the lodged bullet was not noticed when a blank was added to the gun, set with a real charge but no bullet, the combination set off a chain reaction, and the lodged bullet was fired into Lee, killing him. From this spawned a fact that misinformed movie fans continue to keep afloat, that Lee's death was caught on film, and can be seen in the final cut, or the deleted scenes, depending on who's speaking. Neither are true. The shooting scene was taken out and changed altogether. It was changed to a thrown knife, to erase all memory of the tragic mishap. So, no, you can't see him die. If you look closely, you can, however, see Lee's replacement, Chad Stahelski, get a knife thrown at him. This was originally the fatal gunshot, but they changed it out of respect for Lee's family and memory. Despite what you may have heard, the scene that has Lee, as the Crow, put his hand over the gun and get a hole blown through it is not the scene that he died in. 8. Jayne Mansfield was decapitated. This one is a pretty gross discussion, but here it is anyways. When Jayne Mansfield died in a car wreck in 1967, her car rode under a semi-truck, and the 3 adults in the front were killed instantly. There was a lot of press and coverage of the wreckage, and some very graphic photos were released. In one of the most famous shots, the side of the vehicle is visible with Mansfield's poor dead doggy in the shot. However, the thing that many people latched onto was a clutch of blonde hair. This led to the persistent rumor that Mansfield was decapitated. While the accident could warrant a decapitation, the records say something else entirely. The accident report states the upper portion of this white female's head was severed. This would seem to indicate something like a scalping, but it's quite a bit worse than that. The death certificate added crushed skull with avulsion, forcible separation or detachment of cranium and brain. Gross. The question remains, was the hair a wig, or was it Mansfield's actual hair?